For 100 years, the car industry belonged to three countries: Germany, Japan, America, Toyota, Mercedes, Ford, Volkswagen. These weren't just companies, they were the pride of entire nations. And then, in the space of 3 years, it all fell apart. Mercedes, profits down 28%. Porsche, down 92% in a single year. Stellantis, the group behind Jeep, Peugeot, and Fiat, posted a $26 billion loss. Volkswagen announced 50,000 job cuts, and behind every single one of those numbers, there's one name: BYD, a Chinese company that 20 years ago was still making phone batteries. Today, it sells more electric cars than anyone on the planet. This is the story of how a 29-year-old engineer with a $40,000 loan brought the entire global car industry to its knees, and why the cracks are now starting to show. It starts in 1995, Shenzhen, China. A 29-year-old engineer named Wang Chuanfu borrows $40,000 from his cousin. He rents a small workshop and starts making rechargeable batteries. Not cars, batteries. Within 7 years, he is supplying Motorola and Nokia. By 2003, BYD is the biggest battery maker in the world, and that is when Wang does something nobody understands. He takes the money and buys a bankrupt state-owned car factory in the middle of nowhere. His own investors try to stop him. BYD's stock drops by 2.7 billion Hong Kong dollars in 2 days. The Chinese business press calls it a joke. A battery guy walking into the most capital-intensive industry on the planet. Wang didn't even have a driver's license. But his logic was simple. The future of the car wasn't the engine, it was the battery. And nobody on Earth knew more about batteries than him. It would take him 15 years of humiliation before the rest of the world understood what he was actually building. During those 15 years, while journalists laughed at his cars and Elon Musk mocked him on live American television, Wang made 3 decisions that would quietly change the world. Move number 1, build everything. Tesla buys its batteries from Panasonic. Volkswagen relies on hundreds of outside suppliers for chips, motors, electronics, even the glass. BYD decided to build everything in-house: batteries, semiconductors, motors, power electronics, windshields, headlights, down to the software running inside the dashboard. When the global chip shortage paralyzed the entire auto industry in 2021, BYD just turned up the dial on its own chip factories and kept delivering. When lithium prices exploded, they were already digging their own in Tibet and South America. Every crisis that hurt their competitors made them stronger. Move number 2, bet on the boring option. While Tesla and every Silicon Valley commentator was evangelizing pure electric, Wang quietly poured resources into plug-in hybrids, cars that run on electricity for daily commutes and switch to gasoline for longer trips. In California, it sounded like a compromise. In most of China, where charging stations were rare outside the big cities, it was the only thing that made sense for hundreds of millions of people. That compromise gave BYD access to the 500 million Chinese consumers Tesla could never touch. And once they had that volume, the economics of scale did the rest. Move number 3, the Blade battery. In 2020, BYD released a battery with a different chemistry, lithium iron phosphate, instead of the nickel and cobalt mix everyone else was using. It was cheaper to produce, it didn't catch fire when you drove a nail through it, and it lasted longer. That last part matters more than it sounds. It meant BYD could sell cars at a lower price than Tesla while claiming a genuine safety advantage. And here's the part nobody saw coming. 4 years later, Tesla started buying batteries from BYD for its own cars. The company Musk laughed at on television was now supplying the batteries inside Teslas. Let that sink in. By now, this sounds like a business school case study. Vertical integration, bold hybrid strategy, breakthrough battery, amazing. Except it's not the full story, not even close, because BYD didn't rise out of nowhere. And if you want to understand what's really happening, you have to look at what nobody talks about. Between 2015 and 2020, the Chinese government gave BYD roughly $4.3 billion in direct subsidies. Let me say that again. $4.3 billion of free money. In 2016, the year BYD poached its star designer from Audi, the subsidies they collected from Beijing were higher than the company's entire net profit. Without the Chinese government writing checks, BYD wasn't making money that year. It was losing it, and it wasn't just cash. Free land for factories, zero-interest loans from state-owned banks, tax breaks on research and development, guaranteed public contracts for buses and taxis in hundreds of Chinese cities. Subsidies handed directly to buyers so that every BYD sold in China came pre-discounted by the state. At its peak, analysts estimate BYD was pocketing between $2,000 and $4,000 of public money for every single vehicle rolling off the line. Now stop and think about what that means for a company like Volkswagen or Toyota. When they decide to price a car, they're competing against a rival whose margin isn't calculated the same way theirs is. BYD can sell below cost for years and still post a profit because the Chinese state is quietly topping up the difference. That's not a fair market. And this is why Mercedes can't just build better cars. The problem isn't that BYD is smarter or faster. The problem is that BYD is part of a national industrial strategy. Made in China 2025, the plan Xi Jinping laid out a decade ago openly named the automotive sector as one of the 10 industries China intended to dominate globally. BYD is the instrument, the country is the player. But here's where things get uncomfortable, because the cracks are starting to show. In early 2025, a small independent research firm in Hong Kong called GMT Research published a report that landed like a bomb. According to their analysis, BYD's real debt isn't the 42 billion yuan the company officially reports. It's closer to 323 billion yuan, almost 8 times higher. Where are the missing hundreds of billions? Hidden inside what accountants call supply chain financing, a polite way of saying that BYD pays its suppliers on average 275 days after delivery, 9 months, in an industry where the norm is 50 to 60 days. Technically, those unpaid invoices are debt, except they don't show up on the balance sheet. BYD is using its own suppliers as an unpaid bank, and the scale of it now rivals what Evergrande was doing in real estate, right before the whole thing collapsed. And then there's something even uglier. It's called zero-mileage used cars. The mechanism is simple and brutal. At the end of each month, when sales targets are due, BYD dealerships register thousands of brand new cars in the name of shell companies they control. Then they immediately resell them on the second-hand market as used 0 kilometers. On paper, those cars count as new car sales. In reality, no real customer ever bought them. They end up parked in giant lots across China, sometimes for months. Images from 2024 show rows of BYDs abandoned in fields, slowly rusting, which raises an uncomfortable question. When BYD tells the world it sold 4.6 million vehicles last year, how many of those were actually sold to human beings? And the financials are starting to wobble fast. First quarter 2026, net profit dropped 55%. That is not a slowdown, that is a collapse. Global sales in early 2026 fell 41% year on year. Geely, the rival Chinese giant, is starting to eat BYD's lunch at home. The quality problems have been piling up in parallel. In September 2024, BYD recalled nearly 97,000 vehicles over a steering defect that could cause short circuits and spontaneous fires, the biggest recall in the company's history. In October 2025, another 115,000 vehicles were recalled for a different problem. In Brazil, BYD is being prosecuted by the Labor Ministry for conditions described in court documents as analogous to slavery at its factory construction site. 163 Chinese workers, passports confiscated, 14-hour days, no rest days. The case went all the way up to President Lula, and the Chinese government itself issued a public warning late last year telling carmakers that the price war they are engaged in is unsustainable. When Beijing tells its own champions to calm down, you know something is off. None of this means BYD is about to collapse tomorrow. The company is still massive, still selling more electric cars than anyone on the planet, still profitable on paper. But the cracks are real, and the people pointing at them are not going away. Some of them are now openly using the word Evergrande. Whether they are right or wrong, that word alone tells you how fragile the miracle might actually be. The bigger story here is not about one company, it is about a country that decided to win and built a machine to make it happen. Whether BYD survives its own contradictions or becomes the next cautionary tale, the playbook Beijing used to build it is already being deployed in half a dozen other industries. And that is the story that actually matters. If you want to understand the forces reshaping the global economy, not from a desk in London or New York, but from what's actually happening on the ground, hit subscribe. We do a deep dive every single week. And drop a comment. Do you think BYD survives the next 2 years? Or is this the beginning of the end? I read every single one.